I better know the answer to why I'm here. I assume I'm up here asking for your support for the same reasons you're sitting in those chairs. And I want to tell you another story from my life's experience. Why am I running for the United States Senate? I was in Washington about 6 weeks ago, and I mean this with all seriousness. As I was going back to the airport to leave after a couple of days, I had this very sobering thought descend on me, that if I win this election, I have to go there and stay. Don't get to get on a plane and come back. And it's not like living in Midland, Michigan. The most disruptive thing to my family, and I've still got kids at home, the youngest one's 13, would be to win. So why am I willing to risk winning and spend whatever time and energy and effort and money it takes between now and then in the attempt? I'll tell you a story as I searched my heart, or the answer I came up with. I was raised by a United States Marine. Maybe that's enough. Well, I like to say Semper Fi, and I had one on my car bumper sticker. I did the Army too. When I enlisted, I was literally too old for the United States Marine. But I would say Semper Fi and say because I got Marine blood. This particular Marine survived the attack on Pearl Harbor. And I have always wanted to do this. If you've seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, at the beginning and the end of the movie is the old Private Ryan with his family revisiting the graveyard at Normandy. And I'd always wanted to do this, and I'm so grateful to God that when I had the impression in my spirit in 2002, do it this year, that I did. So the last December, my dad was alive. Annette and I took my mom and him back to Hawaii. And I was able to stand in the same spot, in the same street that he remembered shooting at Japanese airplanes. He was part of that bunch of Marines you might have heard of that took a pickup truck and ran it through the front door of the armory because they didn't have bullets. They got a presidential unit citation because they found one of those planes with only rifle holes in it. Later that day, we went out to the memorial service, actually on the USS Arizona. And I took a picture of my dad, the commander of all Marines in the Pacific, general. My dad's wearing a purple leg, which identified him as a survivor. And what that meant was all day that general and the admirals and the captains and lieutenants and everybody else saluted former Staff Sergeant James R. Glenn. Later that day, we went out and found his best friend's grave at the Punch Bowl Cemetery of the Pacific. Young man's grave had his birthday and his death day. My dad and he went out to a Charlie Chaplin movie the night before and got their pictures taken with a hula girl. And the next morning, Robert Peake of Oklahoma was killed on the USS Oklahoma at age precisely 17 and a half. I tell you that simply to tell you that it was my father, not just by his words, but by the example of his life that taught me to love my country. You remember that you were taught that. You remember feeling that. And I believe that everything he taught me to love about my country, our liberty, our strength and security, our free enterprise economy, our founding Judeo-Christian principles, are at imminent risk of being lost in a way as we as Americans would never have believed comprehensible. If Debbie Stabenow and Barack Obama are re-elected and have the opportunity to finish implementing their agenda, they threaten to take away my children's birthright of freedom and turn our country into the United Socialist States of America. And we and our children may never get a free country back. So I feel a sense of duty, as I assume you do, to do everything I humanly can to stop them. I was an Eagle Scout. I swore an oath to do my best to do my duty to God and my country. And 20 years later, I took the oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I think the threats to our liberty today come more from sources that are domestic than from any power outside the borders of this country. So I ask you for your support because I feel that same sense of duty you do to stop them. Thank you.
This is like channel surfing. reason I tell you a little bit about a little bit of my background is because as your United States Senator, if you want to know where I'm going, you really do have to know where I've been and what has shaped me as a person and who I am and what I believe. Because the 40 years that I speak of my life have equipped me and prepared me for exactly the kind of challenge that faces our country today. The second part of my story that I want to tell you is that one of our great presidents, and contrary to the 60 Minutes interview, it was not Barack Obama, one of our great presidents was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, his administration asked me to do 2 tough jobs. In fact, they were so tough, one of which required to be confirmed by the United States Senate, but it was so tough that the progressives and the liberals had as the predecessor to the role that I was being asked to take, a woman that you probably know. Her name is Hillary Rodham. I was asked to become the chairman of the Legal Services Corporation. Now, I just want to have you do a little thought experiment and imagine what can happen if you give a lot of progressive lawyers $305 million. The president had tried to get 2 people confirmed before I was asked to take on the responsibility, because he had been unsuccessful in getting them confirmed. And when I was confirmed, and I was confirmed, interestingly enough, it was like 80 to 50, 80, 15, 90, 10. It was big numbers. Because I had devoted my life prior to coming to assist the president in trying to help poor people in Detroit have access to justice. When I came back from Notre Dame, I spent the first almost 6 years of my life, I went to every judge in Wayne Circuit and Recorder's Court and said, if anybody comes here and cannot afford a lawyer, here is my card. Send them to me. And so when the president was looking for someone who could really think through how do we provide the least amongst us with access to justice that was being denied them, who do you ask? And I was asked, confirmed by the Senate, but I didn't just go along because, and I'm going to give you 2 quick examples if time permits. Number 1, when I had to testify in front of the Senate Appropriations Committee, I said, you know, I don't need this much money. I wasn't one of those that went along and said, well, just give me a reduction in my budget, which was really a reduction in the increase. I said, I don't need this much, and in point of fact, the biggest problem is the monopoly of the legal profession. Now, when I sent my government affairs person up to the Hill the next day to begin to work through this budget that I was trying to get done, he was met by a United States Senator who said to him, you go back and tell Clark Durant to shut up and spend the money like everybody else. And that was a Republican. It was Ted Stevens of Alaska. The problems facing our country are the problems that both Republicans and Democrats have brought to us. And not just over these last 4 years or the last 8 years. It's the last 30 years. It's the last 35 years. In order to begin to change this, you need to send, as your United States Senator, someone who is used to doing the tough jobs in the public arena, in Washington, but not as a politician, asked by the President of the United States to take on that role. After a commercial break, I'll tell you the next part. When I would go around the country, and I may not be able to do this in 30 seconds, when I would go around the country to try to help poor people, I cut sugarcane with migrants in Belgrade, Florida, met with families in Harlem, New York, East St. Louis, Los Angeles, in the barrios. Here's what I found. Oftentimes it was women who were the ones willing to be the advocates for those without a voice, but who was trying to shut them down. It was the unauthorized, it was the bar associations using the unauthorized practice of law statutes, and I'll tell you what we did about it